Welcome to the deep dive. We're so glad you're here with us today. Let me just start by asking you a question.
Sure.
How many times have you been in a strategy meeting or maybe just reading some industry analysis and you hear someone confidently dismiss artificial intelligence?
All the time.
Right, you know the exact posture. They cross their arms, they lean back, and they say, well, large language models aren't actually thinking. They're just predicting the next word.
Yeah, it's an incredibly common refrain right now, and I mean, you can see why it appeals to people.
Hmm.
It sounds authoritative. It serves as this clean intellectual put down that supposedly puts this massive disruptive technology neatly back into a predictable box.
Exactly. It makes
Yeah.
people feel safe. But today, we're going to look at exactly why that mindset might be one of the most dangerous things a business leader can believe.
Absolutely.
We have a fantastic source for today's deep dive. It's an article by the author Divyan Gupta, and it's titled, Probability is Not the Problem. Why the Just Next Token Prediction Dismissal is Strategically Naive.
And what Divyan Gupta does so effectively here is step away from the purely technical debates, about how these models function under the hood.
Right, getting out of the weeds.
Exactly. Instead, the focus shifts to the fundamental nature of decision-making itself. This goes far beyond just the mechanics of the technology. It's really a deep look at how modern organizations actually navigate uncertainty.
And that is our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We are going to uncover why writing off LLMs as just probabilistic is actually a massive business mistake.
A huge mistake.
And more importantly, we're going to figure out how you can properly harness that probability to create real strategic leverage. I'm so excited about this because this article completely flips the script on how we view uncertainty.
It really does.
It takes what people assume is this fatal weakness of AI and reveals it as the core reality of business itself.
It's a vital perspective shift. But to really grasp it, we have to examine why executives are so eager to use that next word dismissal in the first place. It's not just about being technically accurate. As Gupta points out, it actually operates as a psychological defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism against feeling like your entire industry is just shifting beneath your feet.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Gupta lays out a very clear logic chain that explains this psychological comfort.
Walk us through that.
It goes like this. If large language models are just prediction engines, then they aren't capable of true strategy.
Why?
And if they aren't strategic, then they aren't fundamentally disruptive to the core of your business. And if they aren't disruptive...
You can just treat them like any other incremental tool.
Exactly. You relegate them to being a slightly better spell check or a basic customer service chatbot.
It is such a comforting narrative. It completely justifies a passive approach. But Gupta makes the case that buying into that story leads to the exact wrong operating posture.
Yeah, because you end up waiting for the technology to become perfect while your competitors are already using it to accelerate.
Yeah, because the early value being created with these systems is not about getting absolute, deterministic, perfect answers. It's about cheaper iteration.
Faster drafts, faster synthesis, rapid scenario expansion.
Exactly. When you operate in a probabilistic environment, which is what business actually is, the speed of your iteration is a massive competitive asset.
So dismissing the tool because it doesn't give you 100% certainty means you fundamentally misunderstand the assignment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Gupta frames this uncertainty using a really great mental model about walking down a flight of stairs in the dark. How does that connect to AI and business strategy?
Think about the physical act of walking down a dark staircase. When you're doing that, you aren't performing complex physics calculations in your head.
Definitely not.
You aren't measuring the exact distance to the next step down to the millimeter. Instead, you're moving based on a mental model. You have a probabilistic guess of where that next step should be.
Right. And when your foot lands exactly where you expected it to, everything feels smooth. You just keep walking, assuming your model of the staircase is perfectly accurate.
But then you miscount.
Oh, man.
Your foot just hits empty air and you get that sudden, terrifying drop in your stomach.
I know exactly that feeling.
What Gupta so astutely points out is that the drop in your stomach is not just fear. It is a biological prediction error.
A prediction error?
Yes. Your mental model, your guess about reality, just violently collided with actual reality, and your brain is forced to update its model instantly. Strategy works the exact same way.
How so?
Every financial forecast a business makes is a model, Every strategic plan is a prediction, and every major miss your company experiences is simply a prediction error.
But wait, a corporate strategy involves millions of dollars, market research, entire departments of analysts. It feels a lot more concrete than just feeling around in the dark for a stare. Are we really saying it's all just guessing?
We are saying it is educated, structured guessing under conditions of deep uncertainty. The problem has never been guessing.
Right. As Gupta states, unchecked guessing is the real problem. Strategy sits right in that zone between stable macro trends and the highly volatile details of market movements, competitor reactions, and consumer sentiment.
So humans and LLMs both operate under uncertainty by generating plausible continuations and then updating when reality pushes back.
Exactly. If you demand deterministic certainty before you make a move in business, you don't get clarity. You just get lag.
You fall behind because you are waiting for a guarantee that doesn't exist. Which brings us to something that seems like a massive counterpoint at first glance.
The Apple paper.
Yes, Gupta references a paper from Apple called The Illusion of Thinking. This paper looked at how these models handle puzzles, and it showed that in certain environments, the performance of LLMs can drop sharply.
And even collapse completely.
Right, as compositional complexity rises.
Yes, the Apple paper highlights that beyond certain model-specific thresholds, accuracy falls apart. It reports strict limits in exact computation and inconsistent use of explicit algorithms across logic puzzles, which gives a massive amount of ammunition to they are just predicting the next token crowd.
Yeah.
It feels like undeniable proof that the models are basically faking it.
It does feel that way.
But before we get to why that's the wrong takeaway, we need to clarify what we actually mean when we say compositional complexity. What is happening to the model there?
Compositional complexity essentially means stacking multiple independent constraints or logical leaps into a single prompt.
Give us an example.
It's one thing to ask a model to summarize a document. It's another to ask it to summarize a document, extract only the financial metrics, convert those metrics into a different currency based on historical exchange rates, and output it in a specific coding format.
That's a lot to juggle.
Exactly.
Okay.
As you stack those logical demands, you overload the model's attention mechanism, its working memory saturates, and it loses the thread.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Gupta introduces a second analogy to explain this complexity wall, and it perfectly frames why this isn't a reason to dismiss the technology. How does Gupta explain this cognitive overload?
Gupta asks us to imagine taking a brilliant person, someone who possesses a deep understanding of advanced mathematics, and asking them to solve multivariable calculus in their head.
Okay, tough but possible for the right person.
Right. But then you ask them to do that complex math in their head while they are driving a car in heavy, chaotic traffic.
Under that kind of cognitive load, their performance is going to collapse. They're either going to fail the math problem or they're going to crash the car.
Precisely. And when they inevitably fail to solve the calculus problem under those conditions, you wouldn't conclude that human beings are incapable of math or that human intelligence is a total fraud.
Of course not.
What's fascinating here is how this translates to large language models. When an LLM's performance collapses under extreme compositional complexity, it is not an issue of the machine lacking some magical spark of consciousness.
It's a computational budget constraint.
Yes. Reasoning degrades mechanically. It is a limitation of the current architecture, not a philosophical void.
You don't fire the brilliant mathematician because they can't do calculus in traffic. You just design your workflow so you aren't asking them to do calculus in traffic.
Which brings us to arguably the most crucial concept for you, the listener, to grasp from this entire discussion.
Reliability envelope.
Yes, the reliability envelope. This is the synthesis of those two seemingly contradictory ideas that LLMs are incredibly capable, but that they also fail under compounding complexity.
So what does a reliability envelope actually look like in practice? If I'm running a marketing team versus the legal department, how does that envelope change?
Gupta defines it as the boundary within which a model generates immense reliable value. Outside that envelope, it can be confidently wrong.
So for a marketing team?
For a marketing team, the reliability envelope is extremely wide. If you ask an LLM to generate 50 variations of ad copy, and 3 of them hallucinate a feature you don't offer, the cost of that failure is near zero.
Because a human reviews it, tosses the bad ones, and keeps the brilliant ones.
Exactly. The envelope allows for high probability-based exploration.
But for the legal department?
For the legal department, the envelope is incredibly narrow. If you ask an LLM to draft a binding contract and it hallucinates a single liability clause, The cost of failure is catastrophic.
So the mistake leaders make is assuming the reliability envelope is one size fits all across their entire enterprise.
That is the core error. They either assume the envelope covers everything, leading to reckless deployment, or they assume it covers nothing, leading to total paralysis.
The companies that win aren't going to be the ones hosting debate clubs about whether AI possesses true understanding. They're the ones who meticulously map that reliability envelope to their specific workflows.
Exactly. And that requires understanding a critical distinction Gupta makes. People constantly confuse the statement LLMs hit a wall with the statement LLMs stop creating value.
They are entirely different claims.
Completely different.
It is the difference between question A, are LLMs the final architecture for human-level intelligence? And question B, are LLMs already valuable enough to reshape how organizations operate today?
Right. You can absolutely answer no to question A and still answer a massive, undeniable yes to question B.
Enterprise history is littered with examples of technologies that were far from their final perfected form, yet still completely rewired industry competition.
A tool can be structurally limited and still be profoundly transformative.
So let's look at that transformation. Where is this work actually compressing right now? Gupta outlines 3 specific areas where probabilistic systems are already reshaping strategy. The first one is that strategy formation becomes iterative rather than episodic. Let's contrast how this usually works versus how it works with an LLM.
Consider a traditional corporate strategy cycle. It is agonizingly slow. It is episodic. You have teams of analysts spending weeks gathering data, assembling views, and stitching these massive narratives together into a 100-slide quarterly strategy deck.
It's slow because human drafting is expensive in terms of time and cognitive effort. And once that deck is finished, nobody wants to change it because rewriting it is too painful.
But LLMs make the drafting and the expansion of those scenarios incredibly cheap. Instead of a massive quarterly retreat, what if your strategy is a continuous, living document?
You can feed in new market data daily and ask, based on today's shift in interest rates, how does this alter our top 3 strategic priorities?
You aren't burning 3 weeks of your staff's time. You shift from a huge episodic presentation to a lightweight, continuous scenario refresh.
That is a huge shift. The second area where work compresses is sense-making. As Gupta notes, most companies do not fail because they lack data. They fail because they misread the signals buried within that data.
Making sense of chaotic environments becomes a core organizational capability.
Imagine a competitor unexpectedly launches a disruptive new product. Normally, your team might scramble for days to synthesize market reports, social sentiment, and pricing data.
But with an LLM, you can compress that huge, sprawling information surface instantly. You feed it 50 reports and ask it to surface the contradictions or identify the assumptions your competitor is making.
And here is a highly specific, actionable mechanism from the article: standardizing a red team step.
I love this concept. When you are making an important decision, say an acquisition or a market entry, you use the model to actively argue against your proposed plan. You force it to stress test your narrative.
I can see that causing some friction. Executives don't generally love having their pet projects torn apart, even by a machine.
The ego hit is real, but the output is immensely valuable. Even if the model's reasoning is imperfect, it acts as a catalyst for better human reasoning.
It forces you to defend your logic against a relentless, tireless adversary that has no political skin in the game.
Argue against me and tell me exactly why this launch is going to fail. It is brilliant.
The third area Gupta highlights is prototyping. Prototyping collapses the gap between your intent and the actual execution.
Think about the traditional software development lifecycle. A leader has an idea, it goes to a product manager, it gets spec'd out, it sits in a Jira backlog, and months later you see a prototype. With probabilistic systems, a leader can say, what if we tried this workflow? And immediately generate a working, coded prototype in a bounded sandbox.
Does that mean engineering goes away? Because that's the fear you hear constantly.
No, it changes where engineering time is allocated. The effort shifts upward toward the heavy lifting, the architecture, security, integration, and systemic reliability.
So the early stage iteration and validation become vastly cheaper and faster.
You fail faster, which means you find the winning path faster.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about the psychology of dismissing AI, the dark stairs, the reliability envelope, and how strategy is speeding up. But how do you, the listener, actually apply this without taking reckless risks with your business? How do we put this into practice?
It comes down to understanding the difference between reasoning and ownership. Gupta lays out a golden rule here. Probability is perfectly acceptable in reasoning, but it is never acceptable in ownership.
That is a crucial distinction.
You have to treat the LLM like a highly capable, incredibly fast analyst who is probabilistic and who occasionally improvises with extreme confidence. You never treat it as an infallible source of truth.
You don't let the fast, overconfident analyst sign the final binding contract.
Exactly. Business leaders are absolutely right to demand deterministic outcomes. But we need to be precise about what deterministic means here.
It doesn't mean the model's internal neural network process is perfectly rigid.
No, it means the operating discipline around how you use the model is rigid. You need clear thresholds for action, validation steps, auditability, and absolute human accountability.
Uncertainty in inputs is inevitable. Uncertainty in responsibility is optional. To help operationalize this, Divyan Gupta provides an executive checklist for making LLMs decision-grade and board-ready. Let's walk through it because these steps highlight exactly where companies usually face friction.
The first is evidence discipline.
Right. This is about forcing the model to show its work categorically. You must ask the model to explicitly separate what it is citing directly from a source, what it is inferring from the context, and what it is simply assuming to bridge a gap.
That seems critical to avoid hallucination blending, where the model mixes a real fact with a fabricated assumption so smoothly that you can't tell the difference.
Yes. The friction here is that prompting for this requires discipline. The second check is alternative generation.
You must force the model to provide at least 3 plausible alternatives to whatever problem you're trying to solve.
This is where I think people really stumble, because we are all conditioned by Google search. We type in a query, and we want the one single correct answer at the very top.
If you take the first single confident answer the model gives you, you are treating a scenario generation engine like a search bar. You are severely underusing the tool.
Which leads directly into the third check, which we touched on earlier, the red team prompt.
You must ask the model to argue against its own recommendation. If it cannot produce strong, logical counter-arguments to the alternatives it just generated, then you are likely just getting a woven narrative designed to please you, rather than actual rigorous analysis.
So once we have our alternatives and we've red-teamed them, how do we actually know when to trust the model's final output? Is there a way to measure its confidence?
That is the fourth check, calibration. You ask the model, what would falsify this answer? Or what specific new piece of evidence would make you change your recommendation?
You are establishing the boundaries of its confidence by making it define its own failure conditions.
And finally, the most critical check, human sign-off boundaries. You must define strict, uncompromising borders where outputs require human expert review before any action is taken.
This goes back to the reliability envelope we discussed. In legal issues, security matters, and regulated domains, this is non-negotiable.
Models are not grounded in reality by default. Verification is mandatory. You use the models to generate possibilities. You use structured checks to validate them, and a human takes the responsibility.
It all comes back to managing the probability. Don't fear it, manage it. This has been such a paradigm-shifting deep dive. Let's do a quick recap of the core takeaways. LLMs are not dumb. They are probabilistic.
And guess what? So is every single environment where real consequential strategy is made.
If you treat probabilistic as a synonym for irrelevant, you are making a massive strategic error that will leave you behind. Instead, treat these systems as decision leverage. Map out their reliability envelope for your specific workflows.
Design your governance around that envelope using Gupta's checklist. Use them to compress your iteration cycles, but always keep the final accountability with a human being.
You do not need to win the philosophical debate about artificial consciousness to win economically. You just need to recognize that these probabilistic systems have already changed the operating rules of competition.
And this raises an important question, something I would encourage you to ponder after we wrap up today. We have spent all this time scrutinizing the uncertainty of large language models, but Divyan Gupta's piece reveals that probability is the true, inescapable operating condition of business.
Humans rely on easily disrupted mental models, too. We miss the step in the dark just as easily as the machine hallucinates.
So could relying exclusively on traditional, slow, so-called deterministic human tools actually be the biggest prediction error a modern business can make today? What if the feeling of total certainty in your current strategy is really just the calm before your foot steps into empty air?
That is a brilliant and slightly chilling thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation has given you a completely new lens on how to view the uncertainty of AI Embrace that uncertainty, get out there, and start mapping your own reliability envelopes. We will see you next time.